Well, Patty, it's always fun having Jonathan Rossi on to talk about surcharging and all the legal stuff.
Oh,
It's
it's
crazy,
really
huh?
cool. It's interesting. Another one bites the dust. Kansas is down, three more states, but where surcharging still is precarious,
Right.
legally precarious. But I think Jonathan's optimism is well founded. I think those are going to fall pretty soon.
I do. So I would say if you have any involvement in passing the cost of processing on to the consumer and you want to know what the state law is saying about it, you want to understand surcharging, cash discounting, any of these options, this is really a must listen episode because as Patty mentioned, the state of Kansas folding to Cardex and allowing them to do their surcharging program there. And then tell us about the insiders report today, Patty.
We're talking about retailer plans in terms of technology, how they're trying to engage customers more and what this means for small and mid-sized merchants in terms of the market opportunity. I
Yes.
think there's a great opportunity there. And then James, you had a really cool question that you addressed. Want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've just noticed really this trend. We've had a lot of ISOs and clients of ours that are reaching out about their proposals and saying, we want to display cash discounting or technology or things like that on the cover page and kind of, really this next evolution of what I would even call a presentation. When you're going to a merchant now, they're really looking for something more than a spreadsheet. They want something as a presentation. So I really just talk about that and how to be more strategic there and kind of getting away from the vanilla spreadsheet and working with marketing companies to really make it more strategic and get your point across quicker with that presentation.
Good stuff, James. So what do you say we get going?
Let's go.
Welcome to the Merchant Sales Podcast.
All right, everybody. So we are here with our good friend and returning guest, Jonathan Rossi, CEO at Cardex. How you doing there, Jonathan?
Good. Great to be with you again.
Absolutely. Always great to have you on. So, of course, big
The
news.
great legal mind of surcharging. That's how I think of you, Jonathan. I
I
mean,
appreciate that. I'll have to earn it. Hopefully in this conversation, you'll feel the same way.
you're probably also like, one of the most highly educated people we've had.
Oh, that's so kind of you. That's so kind of you. Thanks. Well, I love being on. I love being on with you both. You both do a great job. You have such a passionate and engaged audience. You always have. You've been great to us through the years. So I'm pleased to be back on.
Awesome. So obviously passing the cost of processing onto the consumer. This is a hot topic, probably the most hot topic, the hottest topic I would say in the last 12 to 24 months. And here we have some big news. Cardex just scored a big victory in the state of Kansas. So, Jonathan, you've been on the podcast several times, so we don't need the backstory there. But can you give us a little update on Cardex? How are things going? And then give us a little context about what happened in Kansas.
I appreciate it. And when this happened, James and Patty, I knew I wanted to come on and discuss it. I think I emailed you the night of, actually.
Right.
So
I
really
believe
happy
it
to connect
was.
today. Definitely. Thanks for the question about Cardex. Cardex is doing great for a couple reasons. One of which is in this economic environment, cutting costs has become a priority for many businesses. And that's really making our message very resonant. So many are looking to pass on their credit card processing fees. They want to do it without added complexity or liability. That's where we come in. And Cardex is all about automatic compliance, as you know. And I'm excited to talk about the result in our case in Kansas. I was really honored to be a part of it. It's historic. And for all time now, when we come on the show in the future, you and I, and when anyone is talking about the history of no surcharge laws, this case really goes right in that conversation. And we're pleased the federal courts recognize the precedent. They held that Kansas's no surcharge law was unconstitutional as applied to Cardex's pricing model, Cardex's software. So now we are able to enter our 47th state. We already have done, in fact. And we're really pleased also that the federal courts recognized the benefits of our solution to businesses and consumers and the importance of the First Amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So I want to do something a little different in this episode because, of course, we've already had you on several times to talk about, it seems like there's this history of just kind of victory after victory here, which is fantastic. But I want to do a little bit of a different angle today because, there's so many topics around this idea of passing the cost of processing onto the consumer. I took some time, as you know, Jonathan, to read the entire court document that you sent. And, I wish we had 4 or 5 hours to, really
Right.
go through it, but I want to really highlight some of the key things and really hopefully leverage your expertise to educate our audience a little bit. So I wanted to start off with two things that I think kind of go together. First of all, if you could talk about this concept of commercial speech rights, free speech as it applies to a business, commercial free speech rights, and
Mhm.
then also maybe touch on the Supreme Court. I noticed in the document that the Supreme Court case, Expressions Hair Design, that precedent was mentioned along with this commercial speech right. So, can you educate our audience a little bit about what that is and how that applies to surcharge
Mhm.
bans?
I'm happy to do it. Yeah, that really goes back to 2017 when we served as amicus in the challenge to the New York law that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court held at that time that if a state law allows discounts for cash but prohibits surcharges for credit, it's a regulation of protected commercial speech under the First Amendment. And that's because charging less for cash and charging more for credit are economically identical. It really comes down to how you choose to frame the price or how
Mhm.
you choose to communicate the price. And that is speech. So once we had that precedent, the question since that time, since 2017, has been, is it a permissible speech regulation? There are some valid regulations of commercial speech in our society, but there are also some that go too far, some that go way too far in the case of no surcharge laws. So we had the legal precedent, James, but there's a way in which this Kansas case I feel is very unique. And that is that the other cases were led by merchants as plaintiffs. Here, we as a surcharging provider were the
Mm.
plaintiff. And I think that this case really shows that the product leader is in a unique position to move the regulatory strategy forward. And here's why. This was very intentional on our part. I had the idea that if we took this approach, we would be able to preempt the objections that we commonly saw from the states in the other no surcharge litigations. So, what were those? There were really two. The first is if you allow surcharges, there are going to be surprise fees. Customers won't even be told they're paying a fee until they walk out of the store. Let's say they see they were charged more than what they thought. The second is if you allow surcharges, businesses will charge fees way in excess of what they actually pay for processing. They'll use the surcharge as a profit center. That's
Right.
something that states had speculatively raised as an objection in the other litigations. So I knew we had the strong legal precedent, but I felt that if we grounded it in real world facts about our solution, how our solution actually works in practice, we in fact even included screenshots of Lightbox, that's our online payment form, screenshots of our terminal signage in the factual record that
Mhm.
all went before the judge. And I knew that if we did that, it'd be an even stronger case. It would really show that consumer benefit and transparency is at the heart of the model. And you would see how clear and effective the disclosures are. Going back to, like I said, those objections we wanted to preempt, you would see that with our model, the surcharge is always equal to what the merchant pays us for processing. They don't profit from it. And in fact, they couldn't abuse it if they wanted to. So, what was really key to this case is how Cardex works. And that theory paid off. The ruling is not saying any which way you cut it, the law is unconstitutional. Rather, the court held that the law is unconstitutional as applied to Cardex's software. It leaves open the possibility that if the fact pattern were different, there could be enforcement
Sure.
down the road. But we grounded this in real world facts about our solution. And one of the benefits was both parties, including the state of Kansas, actually agreed that our speech was truthful and non misleading. And that brings me right back to your question. Once you're in the province of government banning truthful and non misleading speech, you have a very strong First Amendment case.
Right. Right. Jonathan, I've heard in several of these surcharging cases, um, state prohibitions about how they are unconstitutionally vague.
Mhm.
And I was wondering, and this, that's a little arcane, I think, for a lot of us. Can you maybe explain what that means? And also, if you could touch on, what it means in terms of due process. Right? I mean, there's a certain due process that's allowed merchants and processors that should be in place if these laws are written correctly. Correct?
Absolutely. I would have to let you use the word arcane. I think it's perfect. I would have to let the lawyers tell you all the detail about that doctrine under the 14th Amendment because it can be technical. But if we
Right.
just talk about vagueness in a non technical way, I think it does make sense.
Hmm.
And the question is, do you even know what the law means? Do you know what it bans and what it allows? Like, let's use an analogy. If it's illegal to say it's colder in Chicago, but it's legal to say it's warmer in Florida, that's the essence of a no surcharge law, right?
Right.
It seems very easy to get that wrong. And when it comes to vagueness, I know a lot of business owners through the years have had a lot of anxiety about training all of their employees, all of their customer service reps or their salespeople to use exactly the right term in describing a
Hmm.
price differential if they have this no surcharge law hanging over their head. And no one really wants to do that. It has a very chilling effect. And that's part of why vagueness is a problem, because if you take First Amendment rights seriously and people don't know where the line is, they won't say anything at all. It has a very chilling effect on their speech. And that's a very bad policy outcome under First Amendment jurisprudence and under even a common sense morality, right? And the judge in this case, I should say, fairly pointed out that we didn't enter the state until now. We believed that the law applied to us. We intentionally sought what's called a declaratory judgment, clarifying our rights under the law. Now that we have that, it allows us to enter the state, and that's what we have done.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's so interesting because this idea of, you know, this vagueness, it really does have a big impact. I mean, you look at some of the cash discount programs and all the confusion that exists there. And, a lot of that is around, well, we have a sign and it says this, but if the employee says something else, and it's like, wow, can't we get a law here that says this is allowed, this is not allowed? And so I like that you took that approach and really, I believe, did a great job working with them. And then the courts, of course, really clarifying what was allowed and what wasn't allowed. I thought it was really
I
nice.
agree. You think about the example about cash discount. If you take a true cash discount, raise the price on the shelf, lower the price if someone uses cash at the point of sale, and let's say you're operating in a state that has a no surcharge law, one of the three remaining we don't yet serve, and you've taken that approach. And imagine if someone comes into the store and asks, "Well, that's interesting. Why do you have this program?" I mean, there is a theory that if the clerk answers, "Oh, it's because of the cost of credit card processing," we all know that's the case, right? If
Right.
they answer that, they may violate the law, and the
Right.
business may have violated the law. And now you see why, with that sort of Damocles hanging over their head, it has a very chilling effect. No one even wants to do it. That's why it's so important to get this clarity.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
real quick, Jonathan, and I hope, excuse me, I know James has some more questions, but
Sure.
I'm just wondering, can you refresh our memories on what the 3 states remaining are
Yeah.
that ban surcharging at this
Yeah.
point?
Colorado, Connecticut, and Massachusetts.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yep. So, all right. So I'm gonna read a little quote here, Jonathan. So this is from the court document, and it's one of my favorite quotes actually in the document because I think it applies to our industry. So, this is a quote from the document from the courts. In Kansas, merchants remain obligated to absorb the cost of a consumer's choice to use a credit card because the no surcharge statute makes it illegal to communicate differential pricing as a surcharge. When businesses are unable to pass on the cost of credit card acceptance as a surcharge, that cost is often built into the cost of all goods and services sold by that business, which in turn raises prices for all customers, regardless of whether they use credit or non credit, to the customers who pay by credit card. For the
Mhm.
average credit card user, this amounts to over $1,100 a year, in additional costs. So, what I'd love for you to talk about, Jonathan, when we look at that quote, it goes to something I've been talking about for a long time, which is that these programs I personally have come to believe are really best not only for the business owner because they get to save money, but also for the consumer. So can you talk a little bit about your feelings about that and kind of this part of the document?
Absolutely. And you are right. It's best for everybody. That's why surcharging is one of the few issues, maybe the only issue, supported by both Elizabeth Warren and the Cato Institute. I love to point that out. It's strong bipartisan support. And that's a great quote you read. It's so accurate. Typically business owners, when rates go up, have raised their prices on all customers, which means people who are using cash and debit are paying more for someone else's rewards. So it's a lot more fair to pass on the processing fee only to those who are getting the rewards and convenience of credit. That's what we think people should do. Now, I would also say I'm very pro card. I find it important to point that out because another benefit for consumers of surcharging is a lot of our merchants are right on that line between taking cards or not taking cards. They often
Mhm.
don't take cards because of the cost, or when our sales team talks to them, they say, it's really good you called because we were actually considering shutting off card acceptance entirely. So we've actually seen surcharging change payments norms in could be industries like insurance, technology, IT products and services, logistics and transportation. Those are places where it's expanding the number of places you can use a credit card, and that's increasing consumer choice.
Yeah, yeah. Well, another quote from the decision that I found interesting was where it reflects on the COVID pandemic and how that's shaping people's spending habits. I'm going to read this quote if you don't mind.
Please,
It
yeah.
says, following the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, the pressure on merchants to accept credit card payments has become even greater as consumers are increasingly reluctant to use cash, which, I've spoken a lot about on this podcast, but, James and I have bandied this about, but I wanted to know what you think in terms of whether COVID is driving more business owners to explore new pricing options that allow them to pass on the cost of processing and how that's affecting Cardex, and your push to be able to work in all 50 states.
Yeah, it certainly is, Patty. That's a great question because now, maybe more than ever before, this is a really difficult balancing act for many
Hmm.
merchants. I mean, I mentioned at the top of the call, they need to economize on expense in this challenging growth environment. At the same time, this was data by Visa that came out. Over 85% of customers expect to be able to make a digital payment. So
Yeah,
you do need to offer the credit card option. I think that's very important.
right,
And because of the pandemic, more and more payments are moving online, which is great in one sense, but at the same time, it's more costly for the merchant
right.
to accept.
Hmm.
And surcharging has a huge presence in card not present. It's a great space for surcharging. So, as you know, in April, further interchange increases are coming.
Right.
And those are specifically affecting card not present, perhaps most of all. So I think this is very timely relief. I think it came out at exactly the right time.
Yeah,
Great.
there's so many things about it that I thought it was so interesting if we kind of pivot a little bit
Yeah.
to the other side, right? So this is CardX, basically, I mean, for all intents and purposes, against the Attorney General of Kansas and the enforcement of this law, this surcharge ban. And I thought their arguments against CardX, quite frankly, were not very well done. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this without coming across the wrong way, but at least in my opinion, looking at them, I was kind of like, wow, that was the evidence. So,
Mhm.
let me read this one quote, and then I'll kind of get your thoughts about, this argument where, surcharging is bad because it's going to in some way limit the cash that people. It was really a strange argument. So here's the
Yeah.
quote. The court said there's no actual empirical evidence before the court of harm to consumers or commerce, past or present, in restricting the merchants in this action from communicating to their customers that they will charge a surcharge for a credit card purchase. So can you talk a little bit about the kind of some of these arguments against, what you were trying to accomplish and what you believe that led you to file this action?
Yeah, I feel that framing your prices as a surcharge is the most clear way to communicate it. And I think I've said that before. I
Right.
pay a cost to accept credit. If you want to use credit, I will pass on that cost. It logically follows, it's easy to understand. That's surcharging. And you'll note it's also accurate information. And it's a way for consumers to learn that the plastic they carry has a cost associated with it.
Hmm.
And knowing that, they can now make an informed payment decision.
Decision.
I don't think we should have laws that keep people in the dark, keep them from hearing things that are truthful. And regarding the point about the state policy interests, I do want to call back to, I thought it was very important to preempt some of the objections that we saw in other cases. So I think we took all the knowledge we had about how it had played out in other jurisdictions, and we put a very strong factual record forward in order to
Mhm.
sort of close those drawers, let's put it that way. And another thing I'll point out about the First Amendment is part of the First Amendment test is, even if you accept the policy interests are valid, is there a less restrictive thing you could do to
Mhm.
meet those policy interests? Could the state meet those policy interests
Right.
without restricting speech to this extent? And in the case of no surcharge laws, clearly the answer is yes. They're a ban. It's basically as invasive as it comes. You don't have to ban surcharging. You could, to the point you made earlier, James, if they wanted to, they could cap the maximum differential between cash and credit. You could cap the surcharge amount. You could require disclosure. You could ban deceptive practices or enforce the existing laws you have on the books against false advertising. But like we discussed earlier, that wasn't an issue in this case because both parties agreed this was truthful and non-misleading speech. That's why I
Mhm.
thought it was really important to anchor it in those facts about CardX.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I did find that very interesting. And to your point earlier, that, to be clear, this is not a ruling that says they are taking down their surcharge ban. This is a
Right.
ruling that says their surcharge ban does not apply to Card X.
Mm.
Right. I mean, it was really that
Correct.
specific. And I think that was smart on your part because obviously for business aspects, but I think also for the case itself that, hey, this is what we do.
Yep.
And so what we do should not be prohibited in your state. And I think it really left them with kind of nowhere to turn as far as arguments against. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it seemed like there was a little bit of grasping maybe to find a reason to keep it, but it was interesting. So
Yeah, I agree. I think that, it was really important how you framed the challenge also, Jonathan, and that's why the way you framed it, it seemed so logical that it was really hard. I think it became really hard for the state to refute it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
okay, so moving on here, I got a couple others real quick, and so I really wanted to get through these because I think it's such interesting topics here for
Definitely.
right now at this point. So, in this same section, the document points to the fundamental unfairness. This has been one of my favorite hypocrisies.
Right.
They exempted
Yeah.
themselves basically
Right.
from the surcharge ban. So if you're a municipality or a city or something, well, then they can charge a surcharge. That's fine, just not private businesses. And so
Right.
talk about this a little bit, Jonathan. Is this something that you see that is a pretty strong argument that carries some weight in the courts, or what are your thoughts on this?
It absolutely is a strong argument. I thought it was very important to say every state that bans surcharges, including the three that I mentioned a moment ago, allow the government to surcharge, or perhaps better said, they say when the government does it, it's not illegal. And
Yeah.
people don't like hypocrisy. It goes against our common sense. If it's
That's right.
bad for reasons the state says, then why does the state do it themselves, their own taxpayers in the cases you mentioned? So, it really undercuts that argument about the state policy interest. And I know the court felt the same way.
Oh yeah, it's like if surcharging is against the state's policy interests, why is the state doing
Why
it?
is the state doing it? Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. That was an interesting one. And then
Pure
my,
hypocrisy.
yeah, and then my final one here, as far as from the document itself, is my favorite quote, which from I can't pronounce this judge's name. How do you pronounce his name?
Joe Flat?
I don't want to take a guess, to be honest with you. This is from, I know who you're referring to from the Florida case. I don't want to guess on the record, but
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. It's an interesting name.
The judge in the case.
The
Yeah,
judge,
yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
this is the quote. Such a law, referencing the law here in Kansas, the surcharge ban. Such a law does not ban surcharging. It merely targets expression or speech, and could be called a surcharges are fine, just don't call them that law.
I know, that was great, wasn't it?
So I really thought that was kind of interesting. So, let's take this opportunity, Jonathan, reading this document, you couldn't come away from this document not feeling very optimistic about the chances of a 50 state surcharge. I mean, the court seemed to be, at least as it relates to Cardex, right? So the court seemed to be very, amenable to your position. So tell us a little bit more about, how you felt the court handled it. Is that the perception you got? And then also, how do you see this playing out with these remaining 3 states?
Yeah, we're very pleased with the result. I don't feel we were surprised because we knew we had strong precedent, but in litigation, you never know. So we were very happy. And as it pertains to all 50 states, the strategy really does have legs. To marry together, on the one hand, you have strong legal precedent. And on the other hand, you have a technology that guarantees price transparency. It guarantees over and above what's literally required by the card brands. We actually do a lot of what we consider surcharging best practices. So if you have that also, and you put it together with strong legal precedent, I think it makes for a really strong case. And we bring that and we go to lawmakers and we go to attorneys general, or we go to courts in some cases, and we get them to approve it. And, we've been actively evaluating our option in each of the remaining states, and we intend to be, and we will be, a 50 state provider. It's very important to me. Some people have asked, I should say, if you're already in, now we cover 95% of the country by population. And they say, look, if you're already in 95% of the country by population, why do you work hard on this? Why do you incur the cost? And I'll say a few things about that. The first is, in Kansas, we had merchants who were calling us. They wanted to use our solution. We previously couldn't help them with that. That was important to me. And we also have ISO and agent partners who live there or live nearby, and they want to sell in that market. And that was also a use case I took very seriously. Finally, in addition to that, Cardex is now the surcharging partner to multiple Fortune 1000 brands. And these are companies that have customers in virtually every state, or in the case of some, in literally every state. And they want a national pricing strategy. They don't want carve-outs for different state laws when they go live with us. So this was also very important to our enterprise merchants.
I love that's so important. Going after the large merchant accounts, the monsters. I think that's been a great long-term play for Cardex all along. And again, you could look at other countries, Australia, et cetera, that have implemented surcharging with, And it's interesting, like in Australia, actually, more of the larger companies do surcharging than the smaller ones.
That's correct.
Hmm.
And again, I think the reason is because they're able to do this, across the country. It's not a carve out, and so I think that's really important. So, from
And also, it's important too that there's so much of this traffic is online, as you've noted, Jonathan, and so many ISOs and agents are selling across state lines. I mean, think about it. Massachusetts is right next to New York. I
Right.
know agents in upstate New York who are always selling over Massachusetts, and that really gloms up their selling strategies.
I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So I've got one topic left, a little bit of maybe a little bit off topic here, but I wanted to cover this with you today, Jonathan. So obviously in our industry right now, I think the big confusion, as people are listening to this episode, a lot of them are saying, well, okay, this all sounds really good, but I sell cash discounting. I don't sell surcharging. And when we really break down, the way cash discounting is being done by and large, of course, we have what we'll call it a compliant cash discount or a true cash discount where we're raising the price on the shelf and then we're reducing the price. I
Mhm.
personally know of only one provider that's really pushing that.
Right.
Right.
Everybody
Well,
else,
it's hard to do. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
yeah,
Merchants don't want to change the
no,
price on the
no,
shelf. If they wanted to do that, they wouldn't be calling us in the first place in
exactly.
some
Why do
sense,
they
you know?
need you to do that for them? They can do it
Right.
themselves.
Right.
So I agree 100% with that. So now we're left with these other programs, whatever we want to call them,
Right.
and they're using a non-cash adjustment or a service fee. And really, other than the signage, I mean, the only difference between what they're doing and kind of a normal surcharge, I know there's a lot of other compliance aspects, but when you take that out of the picture and say we don't care about that, really all they're doing is they're adding this onto the debit card.
Uh-huh.
So we're basically surcharging credit and debit. So I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this in general. We see it taking off. We see it gaining in popularity. How is this going to play out? I mean, I haven't seen Visa take any like crazy significant action, or is it eventually they're going to allow surcharging on debit as they do in other countries? Like, how do you think this is going to play out? I'm just curious.
Well, the action is coming, I feel, at the level of the large acquirers. I think the card brands communicate vigorously with the acquirers, and then they want
Mhm.
the acquirers to police their own merchants and their own ISOs. I know some acquirers actually that when you go up for your ISO review, they actually will go on your website and they'll see what solutions you offer, and it's out of compliance. They'll give you a call. They'll tell you to take it down. But as you said, for the purpose of the thought experiment, let's set the rules to one side entirely. Let's just talk about charging fees to a debit card, yes or no. I like it as a product feature. I think even without the background of the card brand rules, I think I would still like it as a product feature because if you have debit as a no fee option, it does respond to the number one objection merchants have, which
Mhm.
is, what do you think that is? You hear it all the time too.
Yeah. Yeah. My customers aren't going to like it.
You got it. My customers aren't going to like it. So if you can say, I have a no fee payment option, you're not turning customers away.
Right.
And we also know as the solution provider or the agent, we're not moving payers to cash or check where we don't make margin. The other thing I would say, just in terms of our particular business strategy, of course, it's a big country. Other people do different things. Our ideal customer profile is a merchant that's very credit heavy. They do a lot more credit than debit. That comes with the somewhat higher ticket size that we serve in our vertical. So, but
Sure.
I feel that you're right on the point about the state law background. I feel that the courts and lawmakers have not historically gravitated to the issue of debit cards. In fact, I don't think they're really aware of that issue until we bring it up. They've more typically gravitated to the issue of surprise fees or excessive fees, like we talked
Right.
about previously.
Right.
But in this case, we actually did put it in the factual record. And you'll see
Yeah.
in the oath that the Judge Brooms noted that with CardX, debit cards are charged no fee. That was part of the fact pattern. But the last thing I'll say, just zooming out, not just this issue, but many issues generally, I think that it's incumbent on our industry to shape the conversation about best practices.
Mhm.
You will see communication from even the states that permit surcharging about the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. I've been predicting that for a long time. I've said that on other episodes of this podcast together. And just a couple of weeks ago, the Tennessee Attorney General came out with communication to that effect. Here's the right way to do surcharging. Here's the wrong way. And we're watching. And that's what, to my point about acquirers, that's what has the large processors, in my experience, still taking surcharging compliance so seriously, even when it is allowed, because it remains a very regulated practice.
Sure.
Yeah. 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 Super interesting. So, Well, as always, a wealth of information, Jonathan. I know Patty and I always love having you on the podcast. You always bring so much information to the audience. I know a lot of our partners, our audience, people in the industry are going to want to reach out, learn more about Cardex, learn more about the solutions that you provide, whether they're a large ISO and acquirer looking for a compliant solution to sell, or an individual agent. So can you tell us where you would send them to learn more about you and about Cardex?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love it if they emailed partners@cardex.com. A lot of what we do is sales enablement. We support ISOs and agents throughout the country, like we were talking about. So if that's you, please do reach out. I do want to say one thing. You mentioned what Cardex does. For those who don't know, it may be the first time they're hearing about us or our company. What Cardex does, in short, is automate the whole surcharging scope.
Right.
That's compliance, IT, and operations. And by the way, those IT and operations pain points in surcharging are very real, especially for the middle market and large enterprise merchants we were talking about a moment ago. But our goal is to automate all that through technology, make it as easy as traditional merchant processing. And you can contrast that with another provider, perhaps, who, if they take a narrow scope, they're going to leave some or all of those pain points for the merchant. So that's really the Cardex value proposition. But like I said, please do email us at partners@cardex.com. I'll say one more thing. If you come to LinkedIn, you can go and follow the Cardex company page, because in just a few days from now, I think you're hearing it here first, in fact, we're going to announce a launch event for Cardex Portal. That's our next generation platform for surcharging. We're really excited to get it out there because it's a very big launch. In fact, not all of our team has the benefit of seeing it this way because they weren't involved from the ground level necessarily. I feel it's as big a launch as when we first launched the company. So I think it's going to make waves in a really positive way. So we'd love for you to hear about it first and come and take a look.
Awesome.
And, Jonathan, I will put in my 2 cents in. As much as I talk about cash discounting, as you know, I really do believe that there is such a value, especially with the medium, larger merchants as well, to being able to say, this is compliant, this is, fully automated, this is e-commerce ready. You've really done such a great job of taking, it's interesting to me, most of the cash discount companies are really struggling to get any kind of decent technology out there.
Yeah.
Which cash discounting, the way it's being done, is so simplistic compared to surcharging with all the complexities of debit versus credit and the compliance and all that. So, kudos to you doing a fantastic job of making this great technology and these great solutions available. So yeah, definitely, hopefully our audience will reach out. Partners, so it was partners@cardex.com, right?
You got it. Partners@cardex.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jonathan. Appreciate your time as always.
I appreciate it. And James and Patty, we're on to the 48th state now, right? So we'll see you there.
Onward.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Well, hey, everybody. So Valor Paytech, of course, the official sponsor of the podcast. If you have not already gone there, maybe you're living in a cave or under a rock, and you haven't heard about it yet. This terminal and this overall system is really taking the industry by storm. It is processor agnostic.
Yeah.
Meaning whatever processor you sell for, odds are Valor Paytech integrates with them. It is a standalone terminal, but it's a standalone terminal that can integrate seamlessly with the online portal, with table service, e-invoicing, all of these things. So fantastic. Go to ccsalespro.com/Valor, VALOR. And, one of the things I don't think we've talked about in a while, Patty, is this customer feedback.
Actually, I was just going to bring that up, James. I think that's one of the niftier things about this solution, because it really engages the customer with the merchant, gives the merchant valuable feedback, gives them the opportunity to, engender sticky customers on their part, and it's cute. It takes no time, happy or sad, just click on it, and if you weren't happy, well, that gives the merchant something that they can come back and say, hey, I'm sorry you didn't have a great experience. Here's a coupon, come on back.
Absolutely.
Right?
So, just to clarify, it's a great solution because, again, on the consumer side, when they get that email receipt, they can just literally click on one of the face options if they're happy or sad. And then again, if they're sad, that can actually send their information over to somebody at the store that can then respond right back to that email and say, sorry, you had a bad experience. To your point, here's a coupon or whatever it is. So if you're interested in any of that, or if you're just tired of selling the same old terminals and you're looking for a different option that's a lower cost option, but also one that has a lot more features, cash discounting built in, surcharging built in, just head over to...
And processor agnostic, let's not forget. That's really important.
Head over to ccsalespro.com/Valor, VALOR.
And now, here is questions from the field with James Shepard.
So, Patty, today I wanted to just very quickly talk about a really interesting marketing tactic slash trend that I've been seeing. And so this is coming from working with a lot of larger companies with our ISO AMP technology of statement analysis. We've been designing a lot of custom proposal templates, and one of the things I've seen that's very interesting is a lot of companies now are including in their. It's like when they come to us, they're like, if you want us to sign up with you, you have to provide this to us. They're including the cash discount projected savings on every proposal, even if it's for traditional processing.
Right.
And they're including it prominently on the cover page or prominently on another page. And so the idea being, hey, and I'm thinking right now of 4 different large companies that we've seen this where they're saying, hey, with us you could save $2,000 a year with this proposal, and by the way, cash discounting savings would be $34 or whatever. That's crazy different, right? Because it's like 30 basis points of savings versus 300, so it's a huge difference. And so whether it's surcharging or cash discounting, they're kind of putting whatever their program options are, they're putting all of those on that cover page. And so I've actually really enjoyed diving into that and figuring out how to do that. And, then working with our developers to code it and our designers to make the proposal template. It's been a lot of fun. But I think regardless of how you're, presenting to the merchant, you would be really well advised to think about, especially, when you have all these individual sales reps out there, I think that the proposal is something that there's a lot of room left to be more strategic about that. And so, you have this opportunity where your salespeople are, making 5 to 10, maybe even 20 presentations a month for your top producers. They're not selling all of them, but they're making all of these, these presentations. What do you want to get across to these business owners? This is a great opportunity. And what I find is I find that some of the ISOs that have struggled, they're really providing nothing to their agents. And so the agent is just kind of supposed to put a spreadsheet together, or they're providing just the worst looking thing ever. It's just vanilla spreadsheet. And it's like, well, doing that, you'll understand that is a document that merchant is going to throw in the garbage can when your rep leaves if they don't make the sale. And you're also losing an opportunity to maybe promote technology solutions or other things that they might like, as well as additional savings from like a cash discount. So what we find is having something really well done, and you can use a marketing company to do this graphic design. We do it for our clients that use statement analysis services. But, when you want to have a really nice, design there, it's really a great idea to put something together that actually promotes things and looks nice, so that maybe when your agent leaves, maybe they kind of say, wow, that was a nice document. That's got some good information. I think I'm going to file that away. And you'd be surprised how many of those might come back, or they might say to that agent that really isn't passionate about cash discounting or surcharging, but they might say, well, what is this 34,000 a year in savings for surcharging? What's that? And now all of a sudden the agent's saying, well, let me explain that. And now you're all of a sudden, getting a much higher margin, providing more savings. And of course, as we talked to Jonathan Razi about earlier in the episode, there's a lot of benefits to the merchant and to the consumer there. So just a little trend that I've noticed. I'd really encourage the ISOs out there, and even the individual agents, think more strategically about that presentation. The age of, the vanilla looking spreadsheet that's confusing, or the writing it down on a piece of paper, making notes on the statement. Yes, you can still close deals like that, but you are leaving some deals on the table, and you're just not presenting yourself in the most professional light. So I'd really encourage you to spend the extra money to work with, a design company, or work with a company like getisoamp.com to do the statement analysis and the proposal templates. But whatever you're doing, make sure it's well designed, well thought out, and it looks professional, and make sure you're promoting the things that you care about in that presentation.
Just be more strategic. I mean, that's really important. It's not just selling, it's being strategic.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Great stuff, James. Thanks.
This is the Insider's Report with Patty Murphy.
RCP, which is a retail management consulting firm, has published results of a survey of retailers it just did. Now, the survey was mostly large North American retailers, but I think the implications, the results have some implications throughout the retail chain. And I thought, it might be good to share this so that our listeners can think of the insights and gauge for where their customers are or should be thinking about.
Right.
85% of retailers surveyed ranked growing and enhancing digital commerce as a top priority for 2021.
No
You
surprise
know,
there.
no surprise there, right? Particularly given the explosive growth of online shopping in 2020.
Right.
But digital still remains just part of the equation. The store remains central to the customer experience, particularly as we've discussed in the past, with many online orders picked up or fulfilled from the stores or curbside. So that means the focus on holistic customer experience is becoming ever and ever more paramount. And I thought that was interesting that 67% of those surveyed ranked enhancing the customer experience their number two business priority in 2021,
Huh. Okay.
which is, that's a pretty good share.
Yeah.
Now, 52% said providing customers with flexible and convenient pickup and delivery options is a
Mm,
top customer engagement plan.
wow.
With
52%, huh?
52%, yeah. But many still struggling with integrating online order management and in-store POS technologies.
Right.
In fact, 67% again, two-thirds said their top POS priority is adding or enhancing order management system integration, and 52% said omni-channel capabilities were a top priority.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
And I have to pause here for 1 second and just
sure.
interject that like it's so crazy. Like this is a moment in time, and I know our industry has been, when I say our industry, I mean merchant sales professionals and ISOs have been absolutely horrible at taking advantage of this opportunity. But this is a moment in time where there's an opportunity where small retail shops and small restaurants and stuff, I mean, they really could spring ahead of their larger competitors
Yes,
in a lot of
yes.
ways. I mean, they're local. And so it's like when we're talking about delivery and pickup and fulfillment, you know,
Mhm.
those are things that they can actually do better than Amazon
Of
because
course they
they're
can.
there. And so, like, if I want to order something and I want to get it, this afternoon, I can get that. And I think, we're going to have a podcast interview coming up in a few weeks. I'm still working it out, getting on the schedule, but with an organization that they do online ordering and delivery. So, like,
Mhm.
they're setting up these restaurants with their own delivery service,
Right,
and like
right.
these things are there. And I think, if you don't understand that consumer expectations, it's interesting to
Right.
me, merchant sales reps, it's like if you asked them and said, if you have two companies to buy things from, you can buy from two competitors. One of them offers free delivery, one of them you have to go pick it up. Which are you going to do? Almost every merchant sales rep out there is going to say delivery. And
But
then you say, are you talking to your merchants about setting up delivery so they don't go out of business? And it's like,
right,
no, I never even mentioned it. It's like,
exactly, right?
no, it's crazy. I mean, it really
Yeah.
is. Anyway, go ahead.
I mean, well, and I think the point is that, the customer experience today is nothing like it was even 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
And
Right.
in 2 or 3 years, it's gonna be nothing like it is today. I mean,
Right.
we're in rapid fire change territory right now,
Absolutely.
and I agree with you. I mean, the smaller merchants are much more nimble. They have technologies that are available to them that
Right.
can almost be done with a flip of a switch.
Right. They don't have to rebuild an entire custom point of sale, national, solution and infrastructure and
Right,
come up with their own in-house delivery. Like these big companies, Best Buy is not going to work with, one of these like they're going to have their own
no,
thing, and it takes a
right.
long time to set that up. And so you really could get a jump on that.
You really could, yeah. Well, I had 3 or 4 more data points I
Sure.
wanted to point out. Uh, and I thought this was interesting. Number of retailers prioritizing POS software upgrades and replacement, 52%
Mm, yeah.
compared to 40% last year.
Wow. Okay.
That's a big jump, I thought. 4 in 10 retailers rank customer identification and personalization of the shopping experience
Wow. Yeah.
as a big priority. Same goes for mobile experiences, stands to reason.
Sure.
And I thought this was interesting. 33% want to equip their sales associates with mobile tools. Now, that's a lot easier for a small merchant to do than a Best
Absolutely
Buy,
it is.
for example.
Yeah, for sure.
And 22% rank self-service as a big customer engagement priority.
Wow. No, so here come the kiosks. We did a
Yep.
podcast. Who was that with? I'm trying to remember all of a
I'm
sudden.
trying to remember who that was with too. I was
Yeah,
trying to
we'll have
look
to-
that
we need to
up.
get them back on at some point
Uh-huh.
to talk more about that, because that's
I
definitely
agree.
a trend I could see. I've actually heard a lot of behind the scenes stuff about kind of as things open up, and obviously the regardless of your political affiliations, the $15 minimum wage conversation and even
Mhm.
compromise bills are looking at 10, 11, 12.
Right.
I think that's also, of course, as a naturally going to lead to more kiosks and things of that nature.
And I also think, the even absent that, you have a lot of merchants who have laid off staff because of COVID, right?
Right.
They can come back on with kiosk, which is going to be a lot more
Yes.
uh,
Cost effective.
relative, I think. Not only is it cost effective, but I think it's
Right.
more relative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because personally, even after all this stuff gets better, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to be standing in a line at McDonald's.
I never stood in a line at McDonald's anyway.
Yeah, it's been a while for me too.
Right.
But you know what I'm
I know
saying.
what you mean. Yeah. No, but you know how I am. I mean, I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
if you don't deliver it to me, you forget about it.
Yeah, well, of
that
course.
goes.
And as you know, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, so getting somebody to
Right.
deliver is a big deal.
Yeah, I think I told you before how excited we were when we realized we just moved and we were within that
The
delivery
DoorDash,
of
right?
We were the DoorDash and Walmart grocery delivery, and we're like,
Oh,
we're done. Now, I'll tell you right now, if I find any local grocery store in our area, even if they charge more than Walmart, if they have delivery,
you'll
I
do
will
it.
go local. But
Right.
again, I think it's interesting because I think, that's how most consumers feel right now. It's like, do I want to support Walmart? No, I really don't. I actually would much
Right.
rather support local. But am I willing to give up 3 hours a week of my life in order to go grocery shopping? No, I'm not.
No.
So,
Well, it's also interesting with grocery delivery. I grew up a little bit before you did, and and grocery delivery was a big deal in the '60s, especially in the early '60s.
Absolutely.
It was,
Yes.
these little stores, and my mom, had 6 kids.
Right.
She wasn't going to drag 6 kids to the grocery store. She'd call up the local Grand Union and say, here's my shopping list, and they'd bring it, and she'd
Right.
tip the guy a quarter.
Right. Exactly.
So in a way, we're kind of going back to where we began.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's just really intriguing hearing these numbers and seeing kind of the direction that's happening here.
Yeah. I think it's definitely worth keeping tabs on,
Yep.
keeping your merchants aware of.
Absolutely. As always, thanks, Patty. Great
Sure,
stuff.
James.
This episode of the Merchant Sales Podcast was brought to you by Valor Paytech, the technology company that is revolutionizing cash discounting and surcharging with innovative features like dual mid support, waive the fee options, and even adding non-cash adjustment charges to tips. Now, all of this is made possible by a variety of technology devices and solutions such as gateways, tabletop point of sale devices, and features like SMS text messaging and e-invoicing, all with cash discounting in mind. Valor Paytech, bold ideas, smart execution. Make sure you head over to ccsalespro.com/Valor, VALOR, ccsalespro.com/Valor, VALOR. Schedule your free demo today and watch videos and learn more about this amazing technology solution.
Thank you for listening to the Merchant Sales Podcast. Whether you are an industry veteran, processing executive, or just trying to learn about the payment space, we appreciate your time. The Merchant Sales Podcast is a joint production of Greensheet.com and ccsalespro.com, and we hope you will tune in next week for more information and tips on building your merchant services business.